Shlomo from Tur, Lebanon, Shlomo from Mount Lebanon. The Mandaloun, a very typical feature in Lebanese architecture, seen everywhere on our houses and monasteries. To analyze architecture, it is always necessary to consider art as a whole. To analyze Lebanese architecture, let us open once again the manuscript of Rabula, or Codex Rabulensis. This book of Gospels was composed in Syriac in the year 586. It contains one of the most interesting collections of Christian miniature paintings. It was moved from Anubin's monastery to Florence in the early 16th century, but only to be studied by Maronite scholar Assemani, who analyzed its miniatures and arcades. While admiring the Codex Rabulensis, we notice the presence of double arches separated by a thin column. This feature is very common in Lebanese architecture. Next to this double arcade, we also notice a niche on each side containing a person. This person is dressed in a long tunic according to Roman style. The exact phenomena is perceived here in Psheri. We can see the Mandaloun, or double bay, and next to it the niche containing the sculpture of Saint Joseph, dressed in a long tunic similar to the example of the year 586. So our Mandaloun appears on the 19th century architecture and in the 6th century manuscript, but not only there, because it actually spread across Lebanon mainly during the Middle Ages, and this is where it got its name from. At that time, Lebanon was immersed in Latin or Franc culture. Its southern half was part of the Royaume de Jérusalem, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and the northern half was part of the Comté de Tripoli, the County of Tripoli. Lebanese villages were constantly visited by musical bands called troubadours. They were moving from mountain to mountain, from village to village, chanting and playing music. Their most common musical instrument was called mandolin, as seen in this picture. As we watch more carefully the instrument, we notice that its strings are duplicated, always two strings instead of one. This doubling, identical to the duplication of the arches in architecture, gave its name to the double bay, becoming the famous Mandaloun. If we observe once again the details of the Mandaloun of the 6th century in the Codex Rabulensis, we notice the presence of an arch above the double bay. This detail is there since this is a replica of real architecture, in which this thin central column can by itself bear the weight of the wall above it. It is called a relieving arch, and it is there to deviate the weights to the sides. So there is a perfect correlation between the Syriac manuscripts and architecture. Even more, the space in between the double bay and the relieving arch above it is not carrying anything. It could be made lighter than simple masonry. So the Codex shows us how it has been hollowed by a rosette exactly under the center of the arch above the little arches. This relieving arch and this rosette are found identical in Lebanese architecture, as shown here in this Bet Meri palace of the Bellama dynasty. Everything is identical to the Syriac miniature. And we continue our observation closer into details, and we notice a bird on top of the relieving arch. It is a lateral view of the bird sculpted in yellow stone. Let us move to another Bellama palace. Here is another Mandaloun with its relieving arch, its rosette, and this time the bird is in a frontal view. Why the birds? Always the birds. Once again, the secrets of Lebanese architecture are in the Syriac manuscripts. Once again, the Codex Rabilensis provides the answer by displaying the importance of the origin of this decorative motif. The birds are above the two arches of this Mandaloun. In this other example of the Codex Rabilensis, the birds are moving to the top of the composition. Birds are everywhere in Lebanese architecture. Here in Hatta Jibbe, the dove is flying over the central arch. In the Mokhtara Palace, we see one standing on top of the cornice. Again, in the same palace, there's an eagle sculpted above the entrance. It spreads down its heavy wings. This posture was typical of Phoenician architecture, as mentioned and illustrated by Ernest Renan in his Mission de Phénicie. We notice again the weight of the wings hanging downwards. The most common theme found in antiquity was the one displaying two animals facing an urn, a plant, or a fountain. Like this example of a Byzantine mosaic from Chaldee near Beirut. The Codex Rabilensis used this composition for its birds. We can see the birds here facing a tree of life on top of a relieving arch. Maronites have perpetuated this artistic theme for centuries, as demonstrated in one of the frescoes of the monastery of Canobin. Let us go back now to the Belama Palace in Bet Mere. What else do we see on its Mandaloun? On the example with the front view bird, we notice the alternation of two colors of stone and the tracery style of design inside the rosette. Same effect in the Mandaloun with the lateral view bird. Again, the amber color stone alternating with the simple white masonry, and again the tracery inside the rosette. Once more, the Syriac manuscript is providing the sources of inspiration. Here is a Maronite book with a Latin-influenced art style on one page, but with pure Syriac heritage on the other. The side providing the traditional Syriac art is extremely interesting and enriching for our architectural knowledge. It offers an alternation of red and black ink similar to what we have just seen in the stone, but it also shows the art of tracery under the cross, identical to the ornamentation found in architecture. The Belama Palace in Salima is an accomplished example of this tradition, entirely constructed in this alternation of amber color and white limestone. It is enriched by a frame made of tracery. The same kind of tracery embellishes the Syriac books and manuscripts. It encircles our beautiful Distrangelo Syriac script and develops all the way from it to the cross through several kinds of stars and pyramids. This rich artistic legacy, reflecting our history, spirituality, language, and culture, is an inestimable treasure that we ought to be conscious of and learn to appreciate, love, and respect, because our schools do not teach us these values anymore. We tend to ignore them. The absence of language, culture, and identity leads to the death of heritage and legacy. Those two buildings show prodigious similarities. Although the example on the left is in Paris, Quartier du Marais, and the one on the right is in Beirut, Place des Canons, today's Martyrs Square. The Place des Canons disappeared, as well as this beautiful piece of architecture. But this photograph will help us analyze its importance and valuable message. Both buildings have one front facade and one left facade. Both buildings are composed of 3 levels and only one span in the width. Both have cornerstones at the angles. Both have a large rectangular door on the ground floor, a horizontal rectangle above the first floor window, and decorations on the sides of the second floor window. Both have a pinnacle on top of the second floor, even if in Paris this floor is integrated to a mansarde, and in Beirut the mansarde is symbolized by the choice of blue paint over the facade. Everything is identical, everything except the first floor window. The Lebanese architect could not be satisfied by a simple rectangular opening. He needed to implant his tradition by adding a central column, hence generating a Mandaloun. The Mandaloun is the expression of the relation between the inside and the outside. The flat opening becomes a space revealed by the presence of the column. The space is enlarged by a flower balcony, which traces are still visible here. The Lebanese architect needs to transform the stone skin of the facade into a third space, a buffer space between the in and the out. This architecture testimony of our past, identity and sensibility has disappeared forever because the people who no longer dare to defend their language are ripped and ready for slavery. Shlomo from Tour Lebanon. Shlomo from Mount Lebanon.